Hey you guys, this is Matt with The Antagonists, and today we're going to be looking at the top Spanish zombie movies. In this countdown, I'm going to be breaking down the films by plot, characters, and zombies. In the plot, we'll be looking at the storyline of the film. For characters, we're going to be looking at the good, the bad, and everything about the survivors in these films. And for the zombies, we're going to be looking at the gore, the blood, the special effects, the crazy costuming and makeup, everything that goes into bringing these zombies to life. Or rather, back to life? Yeah, let's go with that. Kicking this list off, we have the Blind Dead series from director Armando de Osorio. The Blind Dead films are 70s horror zombie films. In order, the films in the series are Tombs of the Blind Dead, Return of the Blind Dead, The Ghost Galleon, and Night of the Seagulls. Now, I packaged these films together because they are the oldest films on this list, and they definitely watch like it. Personally, I found these films hard to sit through. By today's standards, they're kinda tacky, they're quite campy, and they move very slowly. I mean, literally. The zombies walk so slowly in these films. Yet they ride horses? More on that in a second. Compared to more modern zombie films, these movies aren't very competitive in the subgenre of zombie horror films, and thus find themselves at the bottom of this list. Really, these films are for quite a niche audience today. Now, I won't dig into all the characters in these films, so let's just jump straight into the zombies, as they're pretty consistent throughout the series. The zombies are crusaders, Knights Templar, who were executed for performing unholy rituals in the pursuit of eternal life. This meant executing people, feasting on their flesh, drinking their blood, chanting holy rituals or incantations. Ultimately, they've been executed and are cursed to walk the earth as the living dead. The zombies are cloaked in filthy white robes. In that fashion, the zombies also ride cloaked horses, one might say very reminiscent of the image of the ringwraiths from Lord of the Rings. Now in the film, these horses are actually quite important and make multiple appearances as the zombies move laughably slow, and you could easily get around them, so they have to hop on the horses in order to gain ground on their victims. Of course, the series gets its name from the fact that the zombies are actually blind and must rely on their hearing to detect victims. These zombies can actually hear things as minute as a heartbeat. This film series is included as an honorable mention because I'm not totally sure if it would be fair to compare this older series to the much more modern films in the rest of this list. Though I did have to include these films on the list, as there are quite a few of them in the series, and these films have broken important ground for the horror genre in Spanish cinema. Coming in at the bottom of this list, we have Rec 3 Genesis, the third film in the Rec franchise. Rec 3 Genesis is a film that struggles to find its place within the Rec series. We become accustomed to the handheld, real-time, nitty-gritty filming style of Rec and Rec 2, but when things get tough, the handheld camera gets going. Rec 3 decides to give up its handheld and found footage vibe in favor of traditional film. So at this point, the film is taking away one of its key characteristics, one of the things that made it so edgy and refreshing and unique for the zombie horror subgenre in Spanish film, and is putting itself on a plane to be compared to all other traditional horror films. And unfortunately, this is where it falls flat. Watching the films, I do believe that Rec 3 was attempting to take itself seriously, but throwing in some slapstick comedy moments within the middle of the film, layered on top of these extremely overt Christian tones that were introduced in the second film, have really made the series a little confusing at this point. If you're watching the films in order, Rec 3, which is supposed to serve as a story running parallel to Rec 1 and Rec 2, the film really just seems out of place. It doesn't use any familiar characters that have been established in the first two films. This film has really taken the Rec series off the rails. The plot of Rec 3 is quite interesting. The film starts off in the handheld style that we've become accustomed to with Rec 1 and Rec 2. The film takes place during a wedding reception as it goes awry and a zombie infection from one uncle spreads to the entire wedding party. It turns then into a nightmare that the groom and the bride must survive. In its attempt to reunite the two lovers, the film does take itself quite seriously, and it attempts to carry out a similar tone to Rec 1 and Rec 2, albeit forgoing the handheld film style and reducing a lot of the anxiety and stress and suspense that the audience could feel connected to the characters with. We now feel much more disconnected from the characters. Frankly, a lot of the emotional connections and relationships feel strained, feel forced to make you care about their deaths on screen. As far as characters are concerned, most of the ancillary characters don't elicit much of an emotion or much of a connection from the audience. When it comes to the protagonists, you'll probably more strongly identify with the bride rather than the groom. The bride's character definitely has more of a satisfying transformation throughout the film. So the protagonists do manage to keep the story going, but unfortunately, it's tough to feel invested in their journey. When it comes to the zombies, new rules and characteristics are being introduced. So zombies cannot enter religious institutions, like churches. They're also damaged by holy water, and they can be kept at bay with religious incantations and crucifixes. This certainly makes the zombies a little bit more tacky and cheesy in this film, as they seem to respond to vampire film tropes rather than zombie tropes. The zombies can now pounce on unsuspecting victims, which is quite interesting and introduces a sort of parkour element to the zombies that really makes them more dynamic foes. Also, the time that it takes for one to go from being bitten to infected is quite quick in this film. The gore throughout the film is definitely good, and there are no complaints to be had on that end. The special effects and computer graphics make for some interesting gory scenes.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to bear witness to this holy matrimony, to celebrate a love that is caring, accepting, and enduring of all things.
All in all, Rec 3 is an okay zombie film watch, but it's definitely not the top film in the Rec series, and it's definitely not the top film in this countdown.
Rec 3 Genesis.
In fourth place, we have Rec 2. Following in the highly successful footsteps of its predecessor, Rec 2 delivers a very familiar experience to that of the original film. The handheld camera is back, and this time, the plot involves us using body camera and handheld footage from a special police task force outside the apartment building as they head inside the building to actively deal with the infection, not merely survive as it was in the first film.
Abuela, quieta ahí. Quieta ahí, abuela. Vale. Acá, retrocede.
Contrary to the first film, where the survivors merely had to survive the infection within the building until the government could fix the quarantine issue, without revealing too many spoilers, of course, the special team has to head into the apartment building to find a secret blood sample vial. With that blood sample, they can exit the building and create an antidote to the infection. Unfortunately, though, their mission does not go according to plan.
Tranquilo, Lara. La pistola. Escúchame, la pistola. Todavía tienes munición. Lo puedes conseguir, Lara.
When it comes to the characters, you certainly feel invested in the events throughout the night as they unfold, but I wouldn't say you feel an especially strong connection to any of the protagonists or victims in the film.
Vale, vuelve aquí.
When it comes to the zombies, the costuming, the gore, and the action sequences are definitely raw and visceral and very reminiscent of the first film. The rules for the zombies have changed a bit since the first film. They are now very overtly Christian-based as a sort of possession infection, and they respond to Christian incantations and rules.
La sangre de Cristo rompa toda atadura, toda influencia.
If you're able to look past the explicit religious overtones and background introduced in Rec 2, you'll certainly get a great enjoyment out of the film, though I do agree that it's not up to par with the first film. Personally, I found that all of this religious backstory and these new religious-based boundaries and rules really boxed the film into a sort of possession-based category rather than keeping it in the widely open terrain of the zombie horror subgenre. And I have to admit, it did subtract quite a bit from my enjoyment of the film.
Vamos. Tengo que robar el registro galáctico.
¡A ningún lado! ¡Hay que salir de aquí, joder!
All in all, Rec 2 is a great watch, and I would certainly recommend watching it after Rec 1. They flow very nicely into each other, and they deliver a very similar experience that feels familiar and continuous.
This summer, the visionary creators of one of the scariest films of all time dare you to take a second look. Rec 2.
Finding itself in the middle of this countdown, a very overt nod to the ever-popular Shaun of the Dead. In this Spanish-language film, we witness the beginning of a zombie outbreak in Cuba. In the midst of this outbreak, a hustling ragtag team of survivors, from Juan, our protagonist, his best friend, and their buddies, as they decide there's money to be made and begin training each other to help slay the loved ones of people who have been infected.
¿Y esto qué coño hay?
Que no soporta la sangre.
The comedy in this film is excellent, and you will develop very interesting connections to different characters and their different quirks throughout the film. When it comes to the zombies, the visual effects are a bit tacky at times, and conversely, surprisingly decent, so enjoy it for what it is. You're definitely going to be in for a fun ride to witness some really awesome original kills. Ultimately, I certainly recommend Juan of the Dead It is an amazing comedy zombie film in the Spanish language, and I think if you're willing to forgive some of the tacky, over-the-top CGI and special effects, you can definitely get great enjoyment out of this very fun watch. Next on this list, we have Rec 4 Apocalypse. In Rec 4, we are reunited with our TV show host, Angela Vidal, this time aboard a ship serving as a remote lab for priests searching for an antivirus cure to the zombie possession infection. We are informed that the virus of Rec 1 and Rec 2 in the apartment building, and the virus from the wedding reception in Rec 3 Genesis, which occurred simultaneously with the events of Rec 1 and Rec 2, have both been contained, but not cured.
Perdone que le moleste, pero usted no sabrá dónde es la boda, ¿no?
In this final installment of the Rec franchise, Rec 4 Apocalypse, Angela, with a dark secret from the previous Rec films, must now survive alongside a handful of passengers, security, scientists, and crew members aboard this ship as the infection spreads anew. Now, this movie is shot like a traditional film, which was established in Rec 3 Genesis. However, this time, the film makes more of an effort to incorporate found footage throughout security cameras installed in the ship. A nod to Rec 1 and Rec 2, but ultimately, the series is pretty much done with that filming style at this point. Rec 4 is quite dynamic and offers something interesting to the Rec series. A good mix of character empathy, special effects on the zombies, and some new zombie animals, gruesome fights, suspenseful moments, and plot twists, something we didn't get much of in Rec 2 and Rec 3 Genesis. Looking at the characters, by remaining consistent with Angela as our main protagonist, we've come to sympathize with her position in this infection saga. We also come to appreciate her companions on the ship, one of whom was the officer who saved Angela from the apartment building after the events of Rec 2. Of course, we have a character for comedic relief, and a handful of other characters that are good, bad, and some that we aren't sure whether or not we can trust. When it comes to the zombies, the makeup and special effects have taken the series to a new level. If you search for Rec 4 online, you'll likely find a highly popular zombie monkey scene. The prosthetics, costuming, and makeup on the zombies is excellent, in my opinion, the best executed in the series. The zombies are quite fast and agile, as most of them are military-type security. This makes for some intense, gruesome fight scenes when our survivors are stuck in close quarters with them on the ship. I strongly recommend watching Rec 4 Apocalypse, and you should definitely watch the films in order, with the optional inclusion of Rec 3 Genesis. Rec 4 wraps up the Rec series nicely.
Señora.
The final chapter of the epic horror franchise. apocalypse.
At the top of this list, we have REC. This is the film that started the entire REC franchise that went on to include 4 installments. REC, as the first film in the budding franchise, established a truly unique and suspenseful way of filming zombie horror. Shot in the POV handheld style, REC allows us to connect with the characters not through their personalities, but through the events that they are experiencing that we are simultaneously experiencing in proxy. This allows the film to deliver a real, visceral, raw horror experience that is unmatched by any of the other films in this countdown. As somebody who's not a fan of the handheld horror style, I was truly impressed by how REC was able to deliver a quality horror experience with some really interesting twists.
Hoy, mientras usted duerme, vamos a acompañar a una dotación de bomberos en su recorrido nocturno.
In REC, we follow a late-night TV show host and her cameraman as they prepare a pre-recorded segment on the local fire department. The late-night segment attempts to show viewers what the firefighters are doing at night while everyone else is safe and asleep at home in their beds. When suddenly, there is a distress call, and the firefighters must spring into action, and the camera crew comes with them to follow the events of the evening. The distress call brings them to an apartment building, where once they go in, the doors mysteriously become locked and reinforced from the outside with a police and military presence, as ordered by the government to put the building in quarantine. Our small crew must now survive the infection that spreads throughout the apartment building during the night.
¿Ves algo? Pablo, ¿qué ves?
Está poniendo las esposas.
¿Qué unas esposas? ¿A quién? Pablo, coño, ¿qué ves?
Due to the very hectic and raw filming style, I wouldn't say that there's much of a connection made to many of the characters other than the relationship between the cameraman and the late-night TV show host. We seem to care a lot more about their fate than we do about the rest of the characters, but that is certainly enough to keep you interested and invested in the events of the evening as they unfold. The zombies are quite fast, and ultimately, they abide by the traditional zombie tropes and rules that we are all familiar with, including trauma to the head or a shot to the head to kill them, as well as transferring their infection through bites, which includes a transfer of saliva and blood.
El tiempo de reacción varía según el grupo sanguíneo y no se puede pedir.
When it comes to the zombies, throughout the film, there are some unexpected and impressive moments of exceptional gore and special effects. Overall, I strongly recommend that you do watch the original REC that kicked off the entire REC franchise. The REC film delivers an experience that is so strong on its own that it could absolutely survive without the subsequent installments in the franchise. REC delivered an amazing film with terrifying suspense in the first-person point of view. REC 2 decently continued the feeling of the first film. REC 3 ditched it all and attempted to bring the series into a new aesthetic track and open the scope of the story up to reveal a bigger picture. And REC 4 picked up the slack from that shift in style and visual aesthetic and drove it home with a solid delivery on the zombies and a satisfying conclusion to the plot with much better characters.
Acompañar a una dotación de bomberos en su recorrido nocturno. Espera, corta.
Vamos, vamos.
Venga, va.
Venga, más agilidad esas piernas.
Más grave de lo que parece, ¿no?
Bueno, ahora nos lo vamos a encontrar, ¿no?
Bueno, entramos.
La vieja vive en el primero derecho. ¿Qué ha pasado?
Mari Carmen, que es la mujer que ha llamado a los bomberos de la policía, dice...
Señora, estése quieta. Señora.
¿Lo tienes?
Lo tengo.
Es que están muy mal.
y nos van a seguir diciendo que no pasa nada.
¡Oye, tú deja de grabar de una puta vez, joder! A otro lado, ha ocurrido algo inesperado. Puede contagiarse.
Intentar que atraviese la saliva.
La situación es insostenible. Hay 2 muertos.
Vamos a salir de aquí por mis cojones.
And that's about it for this countdown of the top Spanish zombie movies. Let me know in the comments below which film you believe deserves the #1 spot, and whether or not I may have missed any Spanish language zombie films. I'm always looking at the comments and excited to discover a brand new zombie film. With that said, if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to The Antagonists.